Welcome to Shifting from Grudge to Grit, Grace, and Gratitude. I am so excited to have Regina with us. Regina, do you say Matt, or how do I pronounce your surname correctly?
Higher
Matt,
math. Higher
Matt.
math.
All
Yes.
right. She's all the way from San Diego, California, and it's only 6:30 in the morning. How blessed are we to be able to have guests that say, well, hell yeah, I'm going to get up at this time of the morning and chat to the counterparts in Cape Town and South Africa to come and share their wisdom with us. We are very blessed, and I'm really, truly grateful for it. We are waiting for Jamila to join, my co-host, so she'll be here shortly. And while we're waiting for her, I think it would be apt to just introduce the amazing snippets of what we're going to get into today. And again, we will be in the flow and the energy of our guest always. So what I share with you here may not unfold in the actual segment today. So stay with us. So from childhood trauma to divorce recovery, Regina joins us to share her powerful journey from trauma to truth. In this deeply moving episode, we will uncover the quiet side of domestic violence, the courage it takes to walk away, and the strength found in rebuilding a life with purpose. I'm sure it's going to be raw and inspiring because she did say she's an open book before we came on live, and we love guests that are open books. Yeah, and then she's also an author of Lessons on the Way to Overcome or to Onesome and the voice behind Shattered with a Mark. Bio, I'm going to read a little bit about it. A survivor of child abuse and a 23-year marriage marked by narcissistic abuse. She once lost her love for life, but it took her two courageous attempts to leave. But she made it out. And now she's living on a whole new level. I'm going to let Jamila in and then I'll continue reading the bio. She went on to find a divorce blog and private community to support others on their healing journeys. She became a motivational speaker despite a lifelong fear of public speaking. Wow. And published her memoir, Lessons on the Way to Onesome, chronicling her powerful path to healing and self discovery. She represents the quiet side of domestic violence, the kind that leaves no visible bruises, but deeply wounds the spirit. Her signature talk, Shattered Without a Mark, brings light to this often silenced reality. As an executive board member of a domestic violence organization, she leads community relations and recently became a certified life coach to further support survivors. She brings a message of hope, of empowerment, and practical insight to anyone struggling with abuse, self worth, or the courage to rebuild their life. So, for those that have just joined us, our topic today is healing the hidden wounds. Welcome, Regina, and welcome, Jamila, also.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Anissa, and thank you, Regina, for being our guest for today and spending this hour with us. It seems like such an interesting story and one that's come from strength, of course, and can't wait to hear all about it. Anissa, lovely to see you again. I think we've been battling with this cold front that's just ambushed us. Um,
Thanks.
How's things with you in Cape Town? How's the weather treating you guys?
Regina, I don't know about you, but I think you hitting your summer, if I'm not mistaken, or it's not as cold as it is on our part of the world, but we're in our winter and it is freezing.
Oh,
There's no snow
yes.
yet, but it is very cold.
Yeah, we're just hitting our summer, coming out of
Yeah,
our gray
yeah.
weather.
So without further ado, I mean, we always start with, and we've already got a guest, Shafiq Ahmed, saying, Regina, brilliant leadership. So let's get into this leadership conversation. Let's call it a leadership conversation because it really takes self leadership to get to this point of where you are. And having gone through what sounds like multiple heroes' journeys and having to be an overcomer and be victorious and now to serve in the way that you're serving today. What was the catalyst for you in terms of the changeover?
I think I hit a wall, actually. I was unloading the dishwasher one day and just became crushed under a life that was ever pressing. And I started throwing the dishes. And I knew in that moment that I was on overload. Yeah.
When you say you threw the dishes, physically throwing it broken?
Yes.
So it's so interesting that you speak about throwing dishes broken, because just yesterday, one of my clients, we were joking, but actually it gets to that point where you either want to run away or you want to bash things, and it's out of character, right? So was
Yes.
that the indicator for you that there were things that were out of character for you that now you realize, well, hold on, something's got to give here, or something's got to
Right.
shift?
I think I'd known for years, but it would take an incident to wake me up. And that was definitely the moment that I realized that things were out of control and that I needed to do something now.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you get to that point where you are out of control. Or I think it's maybe from a mental and physical perspective where your body and your mind is just making the decision for you, that you don't continue living on that Groundhog Day and feel that it's okay for you to do so, that it takes over. And that's when you feel like you don't have any control.
Right.
And I understand what you're saying. Like for me, Anissa, I've mentioned this to you many times. I just literally walk. You try and push it under the carpet and sweep it under the carpet and carry on as if it's normal and life is going on as it's meant to go on, and until the day comes where you realize that I don't have any control over this anymore because something's got to change. And it's something that I think a lot of people feel that only certain people go through, or if you've had a certain type of a childhood or a lifestyle, this couldn't happen to you, but that's definitely not the case. And maybe, Regina, let's just start at the beginning, and maybe you can take us back to what life looked like for you growing up and how that shaped your identity, and then fast forward to where you were at this point where you felt like you were just not in control anymore and something had to change.
Absolutely. So my story starts um, early in childhood. My parents were um, young and not capable of raising me. And my earliest memories are being with my maternal grandmother. She was my first memory of love. She took such wonderful care of me. And then at a certain point, um, she took me in, and we relocated out of state and built a brand new home. And I started kindergarten there. It's a wonderful time for me to look back on. And when I was in first grade, she passed away from cancer. And uh, at that time, the family came together and made the decision that it was time for my mom to step up. And so for second grade, I moved back out of state with my mom. And that was a very tumultuous year because my mom was financially unstable and we had a lot of transition, and we were in lots of homes with different people. And during that time, I suffered abuse at the hands of other people in nearly every way. And by the end of that school year, my mom had lost custody of me because I had been injured and I landed in the hospital. And at that time, when the case went to court, my great aunt, my grandmother's sister, stepped up to take me in. So I relocated back out of state to live with her, only to discover that she was an alcoholic and physically abusive, emotionally abusive. And so I survived that environment for 10 years. And at the age of 17, I ran away with a few items in a trash bag and camped out with my best friend and her family until I could figure out where to go. I ended up relocating to another state where my mom was living to live with her again. And coming into early adulthood was such a challenge because she still had a lot of the same um, issues mentally, and we did not get along, but I felt that that was a better option for me at that moment. And I, all of these things that compounded. So, uh, dating, friendships, everything was such a challenge for me because um, I only ever remember being loved by my grandmother until she passed away. And eventually I met someone and fell in love. Yeah.
Jamila, are you going to go ahead?
Sorry, I think I'm on mute. Yeah, I just wanted to
Mhm.
ask Regina also, at what point did you begin to realize that what you were experiencing wasn't normal and that
Okay.
you were actually enduring abuse?
I think it all pretty much still felt normal to me because that's all I'd ever known other than my grandmother. And like I said, I was in first grade when she passed away. And it felt normal. It I was in survival mode for most of my childhood.
Mm.
So I came into early adulthood just trying to survive, just trying to stay out of the heat, just trying to breathe, live, you know.
Mm. Mm.
I didn't have time to uh, wonder about, is this right and what should I do about it? Yeah,
Regina, it resonates a bit of your story, even though our stories are different. Because I also didn't live with my mom. I only lived 3 months of my life with her, and all I wanted was motherly, nurturing love, and it didn't matter. And that moment, it doesn't matter if your mother's an alcoholic, if she is verbally abusive, none of those matter because you want to take whatever scraps you can get from the very person that you're expecting to play that role because it is so volatile everywhere
right.
else. And even if you, the parentified child, as I was taking care of my
Hmm.
younger siblings and seeing to the household while I was in, I think you call it middle school, primary school, we call it, it didn't matter, it was as long as I can be near her, even if she was lying drunk on the couch, it didn't matter. Even if she would be verbally abusive whilst in that drunkard state, it didn't matter because all you wanted in that moment was a caregiver.
Right.
And normal, that was normal.
Right.
We wouldn't
You
have
don't know
known what is
anything
different.
different.
Yes, yes, yeah, I know. I can so resonate with that because it's unsafe, and you say you were in survival. So where I want to lead to next in this conversation is when we live from a place of survival, and that was me my entire life, and still what I need to work on today in present day, because somatically in our bodies there's still some of that stored energy, right, in our cell memory. But when we're in survival, we also lean to the opposite of wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard. So people pleasing, codependency, rescuing and belittling ourselves and playing small and having minimal self respect is the order of the day because it doesn't matter. So that you're just not needing to fight, flight, freeze, fawn state, or the fright state and faint state more of the more recent brain science. You actually just in survival. So you will comply and conform. Talk to us about that time.
Yeah.
The people
So
pleasing, the savior mentality.
in early adulthood or in
From your
childhood?
childhood, anything that stands out.
Okay. So definitely in my childhood, I was people pleasing and just trying to stay out of the fire and playing small, being quiet, trying to comply with the ever changing rules. And I felt unseen and unheard. And to a certain extent, that was a good thing because that keeps you out of trouble. Um, in my late teens, that became a challenge because I was, getting bigger, smarter, stronger, and no longer wanted to uh, put up with that abuse as it had. The older she got, my aunt, the more she drank and became volatile. And like I said, it was getting bigger, so I couldn't tolerate it. So I felt that the best thing for me to do that day that I left was to leave because I didn't want to be put in a position where I had to defend myself and harm someone else. Um, moving in with my mom was even more of a challenge because of all the things that I had been through, and that she was some of the things she was aware of, some she wasn't. But because of her mental health, she she too was very difficult, and so from the age of like 18 or 19, I was hyper focused on living on my own or living outside of the house, which then put me in situations that were not good for me. And so, my early 20s, I was just going out, moving out, and having a roommate or situations, and not working out, and then coming back, and then going back to the drawing board to try to figure out how to get out again. And eventually, I did. Once I became a beauty professional and started to build my career, I was stable and able to live on my own, but I was carrying so much baggage and so much trauma that it left me exposed to situations and people in my life, people pleasing, and not really knowing what love looked or felt like, and so could easily be manipulated into thinking that situations were good for me. And when I met my my ex-husband, I was terribly exposed and manipulated into thinking that this was an amazing situation. The manipulation and control was packaged in care and concern. So
Which is also
it
called
felt
love bombing.
good. Love bombing, absolutely.
Mm.
And I can now see how all of these pieces came together to create this perfect storm. Yeah.
Mm.
So, Regina, you were in a 23-year marriage marked, like you say, with narcissistic abuse. Can you
Yes.
explain what shattered without a mark like really means and why it's so important to talk about this unseen form of domestic violence, and what were the biggest internal battles that you had to overcome, especially when no one else could see what was actually happening? And I ask you this because, like my experience from the outside looking in, everybody thinks that you've got the perfect life, or you have the perfect marriage, or you're the perfect couple, but little do they know what you are hiding. So maybe if you could just explain a little bit about that, because I find this like, so deep and important, shattered without a mark. Because I think what's so powerful about your story is that it speaks to the pain that so many of us carry in silence.
Right. Well, I was business owner, and he was an executive, and everyone around us thought we were the perfect couple. And narcissists have a way of placing all of the people around you in the palm of their hand, which leaves you feeling terribly isolated because the image, the projection that they put forth is completely different from what it is that you experience. And that is so confusing to you. And you're constantly being told that something is wrong with you. And you start to believe that because what you see outside of the house and what you experience inside the house is so different. But what I was experiencing was just a continuation of my childhood. So that's what made it so difficult for me to understand that there was something terribly wrong here. Felt odd but comfortable. And this isolation uh, makes it difficult for you to reach out and tell people, because even when I did try to share with people who were close to me, they didn't believe me and they looked at me as if I was crazy because what they saw did not equal what I was saying. And that further isolates you because you're isolated by your partner, then you're isolated by the people that you're trying to share your story with, which causes you to then go deeper within yourself, questioning yourself, asking, what could I do better? How can I work on myself? What can I fix? Why am I the problem? It's it's mind blowing, the destruction that takes place within within you that no one else can see.
And we can't even see it, Regina. And I say we because I have many parallels in our stories. And I hate the label narcissist and narcissist, calling narcissistic somebody narcissistic, because we all innately have narcissistic traits within us.
Tendencies.
So I have this visceral feeling for even labeling it. I know that everyone is at a different level of consciousness, and I certainly didn't know what the term meant until I was in the process of deciding whether I'm going through with my divorce or not. And my therapist introduced me to the term. And when she explained the behavior, it's exactly what you're talking about, because everyone else would love my spouse and like he's switched on, he's hands on, he's the best host when people come over, and he he's just an easygoing guy, and behind the scenes, I'm silently dying a slow death. Not necessarily of verbal abuse, but even in his silence of not being responsive. And I don't know if you found that in that silence when they don't respond, then you almost raise your voice to be heard. And I don't know if you have any kids, but so within the kids' environment, it's like the kids see you as the wicked witch of the West because you're the one screaming and out of your mind because internally nobody knows what you're having to deal with. So it's a silent and violent internal pain that is, like you described, so destructive that you don't even know what's happening to you. So,
Yeah.
Jamila, can you
Yeah.
relate to any of this?
Absolutely. And I think also, Anissa, you mentioned about the kids and they feel like you're the wicked person because, you need to say something. You gotta rebel, and it takes you to a point of such dire frustration, I guess, that you have to. But then on your point, Regina, is that, you feel so isolated from everyone and everything. But for me, I also started to begin to feel isolated from me because you have everybody around you who's talking about this amazing person that you're so fortunate to be with. With the great character and personality, and normally like the life of the party and whatnot. And you keep on hearing this, and then you start to doubt yourself. Am I being ungrateful? Am I the one who's looking for problems here? Am I the one who's just not finding the goodness in this? Because it only seems to be me who's having this. And you become so doubtful and isolated within who you are. And it just makes you withdraw and just accept whatever it is that's coming your way. And that was my experience because I didn't have the ability to speak out or to argue or to fight back verbally. I didn't. I had to just keep quiet, coupled with the fact that I lived with in-laws, coupled with the fact that you as for me as a Muslim woman married into an affluent family, I had to just keep quiet, grateful for what I had gotten and not bring shame to anyone else. So for me, this was that isolation. It was that, you talk about a conscious uncoupling. For me, it was an uncoupling of myself within myself, which brings you to new levels of depression and no self-esteem, no self-confidence, and you just live your life, I felt, drifting like an empty vessel.
I can so relate to that. It was such a challenge for me because here I was the business owner. I couldn't go anywhere in town without somebody, you know, seeing me and speaking to me and needing to be on at work, needing to be on in public, needing to be on at church, needing to be, coming to the house, dreading that drive home, maybe stopping to do something, to take a break before I come into this war zone, and being told that I'm boring, I can't do anything right. I can't clean up a spill. I can't keep the house together. I can't raise my children properly. I can't even dress right. Everything. My friends were losers. My church was uh, just every single aspect of my life was trashed. He systematically tore down everything. And I felt like, um, if you've ever seen, like in a movie where like something happens and pieces of a person is just leaving. And I, yeah, it culminated that day that I threw the dishes. There was
Yeah.
nothing left of me. I was just the shell of a person that I was designed to be. And that's when I knew.
Regina, did you ever threaten to leave in your marriage? Did you threaten to leave, or were you fearful of threatening to leave?
After the dish throwing incident, I got into therapy and I filed for divorce. And oh, he was so dramatic. He broke down crying and for days. And I, of course, did not want to break up my family. My parents never married. And due to my religious beliefs, I felt a lot of guilt and shame around breaking up my family. So I made the decision to stay with the condition that he had to see a psychologist. And he agreed, and we went for 4 long, exhausting years. And one day I woke up and I realized that even this was a sham. He had been going just to appease me and not going to work on his own issues. So I spent the 5th year in therapy alone because I knew what I needed to do and I knew that I needed help to do that.
Regina, it's like we are sisters living in totally different zones, but it was similar for me. It's like because I came from a broken home, not knowing my dad or not living with mom, I got told often, but you come from the broken home, you damaged good. You're the one that's the problem. And so the therapy was also like, yeah, let's go. Even though it's not me, it's actually you, because my parents are still married. And I come from a home that, the parents are together and everyone's united. No matter whether it was a toxic and still remains today a toxic union of these parents with respect. But the reality is that they project everything onto you. So you end up feeling like it is you. So in that last year when you went, was that like the catalyst that built up your courage and your confidence and conviction to finally say it's enough, you're leaving?
Absolutely. I remember the moment I was in a session with the therapist and he asked me, "What will you do if he doesn't change?" I'd never given that any thought because I'm here to fix. I'm here to work on, shore up, um, keep this family together. And when he asked me that question, I had to pause and think about it. I just sat there because I'd never given that any thought. It's supposed to be like the movies. We go to therapy, we fix everything, and we go skipping off into the sunset. And I looked at him and I said, if he doesn't change, I'll have to move on because I'm worth more than that.
Yes.
And I went home and I thought about it. And every time he did or said something, that comment that I made kept ringing louder and louder in my ear. And at one point, it just was like the soundtrack. And I realized that after a few more incidents, that um, because toward the end, it felt like a tug of war for my soul, my life. And uh, I think he could feel that I was slipping away.
Mm.
And it was a few incidents that occurred right at the end that was truly um, a test of wills. And I, I just hit a wall again. And I was like, no more, I'm done.
You know, I think when you go through experiences like this here, that are it does remain etched in your soul, right? Irrespective of how much healing you do. And one thing that I've realized is that healing is just, it's not linear. There's so many layers to it, because as I'm sitting here speaking to you and listening to you, I actually feel like that physical illness, that it's coming up. I feel nauseous just
Yes.
going through it or speaking about it. And you don't heal in a straight line. um, for me, it's in spirals that you heal. And the pain does revisit you, but I think the difference comes in as to where in that spiral you are and experiencing it, because each time that it revisits you, you stronger. um, And some days you do feel strong, and other days you question everything again. But it's not a setback that you're experiencing. It's healing that's doing the work for you, and it's the understanding of having that compassion for yourself as being the cornerstone for your recovery. Um, so my next question is that you are now helping others who have gone through similar experiences as you. How do you deal with that? And is it a similar mindset that you look at your healing? Um, because it's like 20 years later for me, and I feel that
Yes.
unease, that
Right.
nausea, just hearing about it or talking about it or listening to your story.
Right. Um, I'm triggered, often triggered. But it's been, I left 5 years ago. I've been divorced for 4 years. And there are certain songs and people sharing their stories with me, and um, certain things occur that trigger me, and I have to stop and deal with it so that it doesn't continue to wound me. One of the things that an incident that stands out in my mind after I started the divorce blog and eventually created the private community. One of my good friends contacted me about a friend of hers who was having some struggles within her marriage. And my divorce blog isn't all, abuse. They're just, people, various situations. But I took this on personally because this was a close friend of a friend. And I reached out to her and supported her. I met her for lunch one day because she was here locally. And when she began to share her story, it was identical to mine in such a way that I had to come home and tend to myself and work through being triggered so that I could get up and support her and help her. And I remember one day I was at work, and this was during COVID. I had on a mask. I was coming out of the building, and a woman was coming toward the door, and she recognized me and called me by name. And so we both had on masks, and I looked because I don't recognize her. And she pulled down her mask, and I was like, "Oh, hey, how are you?" And with tears in her eyes, she hugged me and she thanked me. And I asked her how she and her son were doing. She was divorced. She was going for her PhD, doing well. And I walked away feeling so incredibly thankful that my experience um, and that I was triggered and I worked through that so that I could continue to support someone else to walk away and start a life for themselves. And so I'm learning how to look at my experiences as a way that I have developed this life and ability to help others uh, move on because my story, my life is unique to me, but I have the ability to reach others because of my experiences. So I have learned to be grateful for this key that I have that unlocks doors for others.
And that's so commendable because most times, I mean, I'm sure you never had anyone who you could go to and speak to about this and about what you were experiencing. And likewise, I didn't either. And when I made the decision to leave, I said that if I could be that one person that could be a sounding board for another woman, then it would make that whole process of leaving, because it's not an easy process, especially when you don't have support, or like we say, it's a seemingly perfect marriage and you being so unreasonable to want to leave it. So if we are out there and are able to be that one person that anyone else, man or woman, can come to and speak to about what you're going through, I think it makes such a huge difference, because you're allowing that silence to be broken. And in breaking that silence, I think that you get a clearer perspective of where you are and why you're doing what you are doing, because you can become so engulfed by those feelings of guilt and shame, and that you're being selfish in making these decisions, especially when you have children, because it's a seemingly perfect environment that you're removing them from for your own selfish purposes. And I think that what we don't name, we cannot heal. And the truth, however painful it is that first step towards freedom. And that silence continues to protect shame, and shame that is misplaced. And I think that this is the reason why voices like yours are so critical, because it gives permission to other people to speak up, and to speak up about what their experience is, and to gain that reassurance that no, I'm not being selfish. No, this is not just me being delusional about the situation that I'm in. I have a right to feel this way, and I have a right to take a step towards my freedom, or reclaiming my freedom.
Absolutely.
Regina, so 23 years for you in a marriage, but 23 years for me, another parallel with the same man. So I that's why I say there's just so many parallels. We've never met before. For those that are listening, let me just say hi to everyone. I have been typing away, so in case you watch me looking away, I'm just acknowledging our guests on Instagram. Thank you for being here. I'm not going to say all the names today because I want to shoot into my next question for Regina. 23 years is a long time. It's 2 decades, right? Two and a
Yes.
almost half decade. For those that are listening in that are either in relationships or in marriages, or what are those signs? I see someone's just saying hi. Hi, Shahid. What are those signs that one has to consider and really look out for, um, that is there, but because they're so silent and we don't know, we can't actually see them. But having walked this journey ourselves, there's two parts to my question. What are the signs? And does one need to wait so long? And you and I have another parallel. I also had to feel guilty coming from the broken home. It was like, shit, I'm breaking up my own home now. You know, the one thing I vowed to stand the test of time in this marriage, no matter what happened. So the guilt that surfaces all the time. So the question I have is this: when is the right time to leave? Is if you're a short time in that marriage or relationship, or is it a long time? And what signs do we need to look out for?
Um, I think that anytime you are, anytime you're living a life that is vastly different than what is projected outside of your home, that's a red flag. If you feel like you cannot talk to your inner circle about what you're experiencing, that's a red flag. Please seek professional help. Um, Anytime someone is attempting to break your spirit, to take away all the things that you enjoy, your job, your friendships, your keep you away from your family, red flag. Um, and if you just generally are not happy within that relationship and you don't have the ability to speak to your partner about it and um, get some resolve and some positive conversation around what's going on, red flag, please reach out to um, professional help. There are centers, therapists, people who are trained to help you, because chances are the people that are around you have been caught up in the smoke and mirrors of the manipulative person that you're in a relationship with. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question.
Is, you know, do you have to wait a long time, or is it advisable? I mean, I know the obvious answer is get out.
mm, get out, but get out safely.
Uh-huh.
Work on a plan. I always advise people who are in those situations, because that's exactly what I did. I devised a plan um, for how I was going to leave, even down to telling him. I arranged for therapy session at the house and had the therapist come, and we sat in the living room, and I told him I was leaving. I told him why, and then I gave him 3 examples for each reason, with the therapist sitting right there. And then we had to have a second session to discuss it again, because I knew that he was manipulative and would try to manipulate me in the conversation, and I was not having it. I was done being manipulated. And so I felt that it was best to have someone, uh, have the therapist there to keep the conversation on track. And boy, did he have to work hard.
Mhm.
And I had a plan, and continued to um, work with the therapist as I was leaving. It took me 5 months to move out, so it was critical for me to stay in therapy and um, work through that.
I think also, Anissa, it's important to understand that leaving an abusive relationship is not a moment. It's a process, and it can take years and years of internal unlearning and rebuilding. And um, you know, the amount of time that you spend in it or take to leave it is never ever seen as a sign of weakness. Okay, because there's so many different reasons that people stay, whether it's financial dependence, whether it's the shame and the guilt, or children, or just your conditioning, or hope even that your partner will change. And I think understanding this just dismantles judgment, and it opens the doors for real support, and especially judgment of yourself. And it definitely, you have to have a plan. You've got to have a plan. You don't just get up one day and say, today's the day and I'm leaving. It's normally, maybe years of planning something, maybe years of making sure that you are preparing yourself, be it whether it's just from a mental perspective, or whether it's preparing yourself to be able to support yourself. Because a lot of people don't have the advantage of having an education behind you, or having a job which can support you. So sometimes it's a process of building up to that point, but it most certainly isn't just a moment. It takes time. And for some, it's easier because it's a shorter period of time. But like we say, it could take years, 23 years, in fact, or more.
Yeah.
Bettina, is there anything else other than us asking you questions? Is there anything burning that you want to share with us here today that you haven't yet shared of your story?
Um, I I think one of the I always like to talk about how at a point when I felt really low and needed to gather my strength, there was an exercise that I did that I found very empowering. I sat down with a pen and a piece of paper and I wrote down every single time life knocked me down and how I got back up again, from childhood to the present day. And I think oftentimes when we have been through something so challenging, we forget, when we've been through lots of things that have challenged us and stripped us of our power, we forget about who we are and what we have survived. And once I did that exercise, it reminded me of who I am and who I've always been. And that the same strength that that 7-year-old girl had to survive those circumstances is still in me. And all I have to do is call upon that strength and know that I've always had it, and see how many times I've had to exercise it. And that it's just a matter of reconnecting with that part of me and walking that out again. And
Yeah.
it was so powerful.
Indeed powerful, because yesterday I was in reflection myself. Being a single mother is extremely hard. There's no downtime for us. And co-parenting with a narcissist is not easy either, because there's no accountability. And
Mhm.
so you have to take it all on all of the time. And there are days that you don't feel like taking it on, damn it, I will say. You really just don't have it. So that exercise that you're referring to, whether it is you writing something down or you listen to something that can inspire you to get back up again, it is so necessary because the victim consciousness in us is also there, right? So we need to be very mindful of the 7-year-old who had the strength, but there's also the 7-year-old that felt like the victim. And I'm certainly speaking for myself, for victim consciousness clouded my life for many parts of my of my growing up, and even in adulthood when something ain't going in my favor, I sometimes go to the, why is this happening again? What have I done wrong? Am I not doing all the right things? So that inner dialogue can go both ways. And so I absolutely love, and I'm going to do that practice myself because it's getting out of our head and moving into the space of what we call this, going from that grudge state into grace and gratitude. Because when we give ourselves grace, we're living from a place of acceptance for all parts of ourselves and all possible negative future state challenges that may arise, and we will potentially still sabotage ourselves. So I feel that there's an opposite and equal of that exercise, if I may be so bold to say, Regina, is that I love the empowering part of saying, hey, I was victorious in all of these experiences, but notwithstanding that we mustn't underestimate that when we were in our lows, it's okay. And I almost want to say that we must acknowledge when we're in the lows and we haven't got the strength or the depth or the wisdom or the grace to be able to move past it. Because even now, in these moments, this week in particular for me, Regina, was being an entrepreneur, bootstrapping and trying to find finance or resources, if it's not finances, still being the mother in all of those roles. You can really, and you've been a business owner in that relationship, and who you are now is at a different level of consciousness and strength and awareness and conviction and courage, right? And boldness, but there will be those triggers that will show up. And so all I'm asking our audience that are listening in that more is join, thank you, and to say that be with the not so great parts as well, where you didn't feel good, because the lessons and the beauty sits in there where we elevate ourselves to the next level. So what was some of the not so great experiences that gave you, Regina, the biggest lessons?
Um, I think when I look back on photos of myself, um, I see the sadness, I see the disappointment, I see the fear, and I just, I have learned to be introspective, and I have learned my behavior for when I am headed into that place. I don't want to take a shower. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to do, I don't want to work out. Those are alarms going off that there is something wrong with me, because when I was living in that space of sadness and unhappiness, I would look in the mirror every day and get ready for my day. Or I would take pictures and look at them and not see my sadness. So I want to be aware of what is going on with me at all times so I can stop anything in its tracks before it takes over. And I think that's been one of the best ways that I can take care of myself is to know what's going on with me at all times. Know how you respond to things that are happening to you.
Mm.
Mm.
So that's what we started our conversation with, a comment of one of our guests around leadership. And so it's knowing and having that attunement and being attuned to yourself in such a way that you are able to observe your thoughts, your emotions, the sensations that show up in your body, the vices, and being able to then cultivate practicing that self command, which ultimately means is that I'm learning to lead and master myself in the good and the bad times, and that I'm not shaming those parts of myself anymore. I'm actually recognizing it and thanking it, because now I have better awareness. So I'm really grateful, Regina. There's been so many beautiful, deep resonance that I have felt during this conversation, Jamila. I don't know about you, but that feeling that you said was coming up, it was like, yes, yes. In closing, what would you like to say to Jamila, to Regina, or ask? And is there anything else you want to add in closing? So, Jamila, over to you.
I think just in closing, also, we should always revisit our inner child, because a lot of the experiences that we've had when we were our younger selves keep on showing up in the experiences that we have as we get older and older. So it's so important to be able to go back and to embrace that younger self, and to embrace those feelings of insecurity, those feelings that bring up that uneasiness in your stomach. It has a root, and it's so important for us to go back and to continually try to find out why, right? And to reassure that 7-year-old Jamila or that 9-year-old Regina for experiences that she may have had then, which then reflect how she's feeling at a later time in her life. And just in closing, survivors don't just leave the relationship, they have to rediscover who they are outside of that relationship, and to keep in mind that after trauma, irrespective of what you've experienced, you can bloom in ways that you never ever imagined. And it's not despite of the trauma, but through it that you can achieve this. And for me, rediscovering and understanding who you are is an ongoing process in your life. You keep on learning about journaling, about different modalities. For me, theta healing and family constellations have given me so much of insight as to who I am and why I am the way that I am. So, Regina, thank you so much for being that voice, for speaking about, your experiences and turning that pain into purpose. I'm sure it's touched so many lives in such positive ways. And I thank you for being here and sharing your journey with us. And, it's hit so many common touch points in both Anissa and I, and I'm sure to many of the viewers out there. So I thank you for your courage. I thank you for being here and for sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me on to share my story and to um, talk about how, you know, this resonates with all of us, and hopefully the viewers find it helpful.
So, on that note, the best way to, like Jamila says, is you got to name it to tame it or to heal it. And we've got to get back to leading ourselves and learning to master ourselves, as Regina has so beautifully demonstrated in the ways that she have. Regina, please do stay on with us. We normally do a short debrief, if that's okay with you. I will end the live stream. Thank you for everyone that's been here on Instagram. For those that have joined a little bit late, please go and listen back to the replay. It was a powerful, powerful, beautiful vulnerable share that Regina has graced us with today. And so, on that note, I'll end and we'll see you again same time next week. Bye for now.